Beyond the Yellow Fog by Emmett McDowell. Part 8 of 8. This story appeared in Planet Stories, spring of 1947. Extensive research by Project Gutenberg at Gutenberg.org did not uncover any evidence that the copyright on this publication was renewed. Chapter 9. Gavin's heart sank. Of course the ship that brought Y would be hidden in the neighborhood. It would be simple enough for them to refuel the Nova. Y had taken time to release the slaves and dispose of the bodies of the crew. That, Gavin surmised, was what had delayed the Nova's takeoff long enough for him to slip aboard. Now, should the Nova be apprehended in space, the Interplanetary Patrol would be forced to release her for lack of evidence. Wilanowski glanced up. "We're licked, lad. We may as well toss in the towel." Gavin looked at the chief engineer blankly. "You mean," asked Y of Wilanowski, "that you and Murdoch are working for the same organization?" The chief engineer laughed bitterly. "We're not working for anyone but ourselves. You forget, Mr. Y, that the four-dimensional drive isn't the only contribution I've made to interplanetary travel. General Atomic stole the others. We had hoped," he jerked his head at Gavin, "to keep this one for ourselves." Gavin's mind was going in circles like a dog chasing its tail. What was Wilanowski's motive? "Go on," said Y in a foreboding voice. Wilanowski looked down at his chains. "A ship travels through space during a passage of time. It had occurred to me that if I could invert the formula and drive a ship through time during a passage of space, the crude rocket ships could be abandoned. Murdoch had got in trouble when Transplanet was discovered to be a colonial smuggling ring. He had studied astrophysics under me at New Yale. I knew him and knew I could trust him." Gavin swallowed and struggled to keep a grip on himself. Obviously, Wilanowski had something up his sleeve. Wilanowski looked at Gavin. "We needed a spaceship to complete our experiments. The effect of the drive on a body at rest was startling enough to predict success if we could attain sufficient velocity." Gavin thought he detected a faint stressing of the word startling. Wilanowski had said the effect of the drive on a body at rest was startling. The Nova was at rest. "I persuaded Cabot," Wilanowski proceeded, "to let me install the mechanism aboard the Nova. Murdoch was to try—" Gavin jumped. With a backhanded, edge-on swipe, he caught Y in the throat full on his larynx. Nadia screamed as Y went over backwards and lay still. The Factor leaped to his feet. Gavin kicked him in the belly. Spinning against the girl, he wrenched out of her hand the dart gun which she was drawing. "The keys!" Wilanowski panted. "Y has them!" Nadia opened her mouth to scream again. "Don't!" Gavin pointed the dart gun straight at her open mouth. Nadia shut it. The Factor was writhing on the deck, but Y lay like dead. Gavin found the keys and released Wilanowski. "The engine room!" he cried. "We've got to reach the engine room!" "Take Y's gun," said Gavin. He turned on Nadia. "Come along, we can't leave you here to sound an alarm." Nadia's lips were bloodless. She moved stiffly between them, Gavin's dart gun prodding her gently in the spine. They reached the engine room without being discovered and disarmed the startled guard. Wilanowski whistled a bar in C-sharp and then said, "Open sesame." The door in the steel bulkhead swung soundlessly outward. There was a faint grin on Wilanowski's homely face. "Soundwave set its mechanism in operation. I read a story when I was a youngster, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves," he confessed. "When I built the lock, I couldn't resist designing it to respond to those vibrations." The ship rocked slightly. "What's that?" Felt like the blowback of an atom jet, Gavin replied tersely. I think Y's ship, the Comet, is landing. The Nova rocked again, more violently than before, and a faint rush of flaming jets penetrated to the engine room. Wilanowski scuttled through the door with Gavin prodding Nadia after him. The chief darted for the control board, seized a gleaming lever, slid it cautiously along a slot. The huge spherical tube, which Gavin had observed before, began to glow gently. The yellow mist he saw was gathering in the outer room, but the air in their chamber remained crystal clear. The time field, Wilanowski explained, creates a neutral area, an oasis around the point of generation. Gavin rubbed his eyes. On the other side of the door was nothing. It was like looking out into the void beyond the farthermost limits of the stars. Now, Murdoch, Gavin heard Wilanowski ask, when do you expect the interplanetary patrol spacers to land? Gavin wheeled around. There was an uncertain smile on Wilanowski's homely features. How did you know? The little death, Wilanowski explained complacently. When Miss Petrovna told me her dream, I knew. You are a TIS agent, Nadia interrupted in an odd voice. She put her hand on Gavin's sleeve. You're going to turn me over to the courts? 2 white patches appeared at the corners of Gavin's mouth. Sure, the patrol spacers are on their way. I couldn't turn them back now. He paused. Even if I wanted to. Give me a chance, Gavin, he asked. Why did you sell out to Tri-World? The girl lifted her eyes to his. I was proscribed. Tri-World has granted me amnesty. That was their price. My life. I wouldn't have done it, Gavin, but I was afraid. Does that explain why you tried to double-cross Tri-World in the first place? I told you about that. And what about Trev? He hid you out when you were proscribed. He got you aboard the Nova. Why did you sell him out to Cabot? But I didn't. Don't lie to me, he said, and gripped her shoulders. You made your dicker with Tri-World. Trev was in your way. He knew too much about you. He might even have got wind of what you were up to. So you went to Cabot and told him about Trev being a dealer in scientific secrets. You knew Cabot would kill him, thinking the Martian had sold out to X. The girl flinched. I'm not asking you to shield me, Gavin. Turn me loose. Just let me have a fighting chance to escape. Give me a chance, Gavin. And Cabot, Gavin continued inexorably, his pale blue eyes stony. You delivered Cabot and the Nova over to Tri-World. He turned her loose. Give you a chance? He repeated and gave a short, bitter laugh. A chance to do what? Double-cross me like you have everyone else? Nadia shrank away. The dream, she said in a frightened voice. It's just as it was in the dream. You laughed. Wilanowski interrupted sadly. You weren't dreaming during the little death. We're only equipped with 3-dimensional sense organs. We're blind to everything but the immediate instant. But time's a dimension. It's coexistent. When the Nova was projected across time, your entire life was spread out around you. What you actually did was experience a segment of your life. It happened to be a segment in the future. Nadia's lips were bloodless. You guessed when I told you about the dream? I didn't guess, replied Wilanowski. I knew. Miss Petrovna, if you saw the Nova captured by the Interplanetary Patrol through efforts of Murdoch, who was a TIS agent, then it was inevitable that it would take place exactly as you had seen it. There was nothing any of us could do about it. A faint grin broke across Wilanowski's homely face. I saw that it behooved me to give Murdoch a hand when and if he needed it. Gavin said, I think I can promise you amnesty, Wilanowski. I couldn't have captured the Nova without your help. That's not all, Wilanowski chuckled. The Empire will want this space drive to power her ships. I'll be a valuable man. Even Y didn't intend to kill me until I had explained its mechanism to Tri-World's scientists. How long, asked Gavin abruptly, have we been on Jupiter? I lost track after that shell knocked me out at the cantonment. This is the second day. Gavin wrinkled his brow. The patrol ships should be here in about 4 hours. Outside the Nova, a gaping hole in space marked her position. The astounded crew of the Comet, who had landed prepared to refuel the captured Nova, eyed the eerie vacancy with mixed emotions. One of the crew flung a rock into the enveloping blackness. It disappeared. There was no sound of its falling to the ground. The commander of the Comet, deprived of wise guidance, fumed nervously. He glanced at his watch at intervals, saying at length, "If the Nova doesn't reappear by dark, we'll take off. We can lay up and re-establish contact by radio." The men gathered about the maw of blackness, staring into it with hypnotic fascination. They fell an easy prey to the 5 sleek patrol craft, which plummeted down on them 3 hours later. The short Jovian day was on the wane when the Nova began to gather substance like a tenuous cloud. Her misty outlines grew solid. Then the port opened. Gavin Murdoch appeared in the entrance. Commandant Samuels, a grizzled veteran of the TIS, was the first man up the gangplank. He shook Gavin's hand. "Nice work, Murdoch, but it smacks damnably of witchcraft." The flight commander was right behind him, followed by the captains of the Empire's patrol spacers. The flight commander caught sight of 2 of Y's men lying unconscious, just within the port. "What the hell's this, the Palace of the Sleeping Beauty?" "You haven't seen the half of it," Gavin assured him with a grin. "They're lying all over the ship like that. Wilanowski says the effects last about an hour. Better lock them up before they come to." "Wilanowski?" echoed the TIS commandant. "He's not dead, is he?" "No," said Gavin, surprised at the anxiety in the commander's voice. "Good," growled Samuels. He lowered his voice to a subdued roar. "Ticklish mission. I'm supposed to persuade him to accept a post on the Emperor's Bureau of Research. They're afraid his space drive will fall into the wrong hands. But Wilanowski's such an embittered old goat, he'll probably—" There was a faint chuckle behind Gavin. Wilanowski, who had come up unobserved, said, "Your diplomacy, Commandant Samuels, is unique." There was a broad grin on his homely face. "I couldn't think of opposing such finesse." The grizzled TIS commandant's features flamed an apoplectic red. Then he burst into laughter, wiped his eyes, and blew his nose. "Where's Nadia?" Gavin asked sharply. "I'm to my old chair in the officers' mess." Wilanowski handed Gavin the keys. Gavin passed them on to the commandant. He gave a terse but concise report, while the men filed aboard and began to cart the unconscious Tri-World agents off to the patrol spacers. Y was found to be dead, the blow on his esophagus having killed him. When the mask was stripped from his face, Commandant Samuels identified him in amazement as the chief of Tri-World's Gestapo. "We caught X, too," he said. "We received a flash aboard the flagship that X has been captured in space." "What was he charged with?" "Piracy. Y's men will be tried on the same charges. Tri-World, of course, will disclaim any connection, but she'll have to rebuild her Gestapo from top to bottom." Gavin moved aside to allow 2 men with a stretcher to pass out the lock. The body of the factor lay on the stretcher, looking thin as a straw. He was alive, Gavin noted, seeing his chest move faintly. "This gives the death blow to the slave trade," the commandant began. Then he realized Gavin wasn't listening. Nadia Petrovna followed the stretcher. Her hands were in irons, and a guard walked beside her. She passed silently between the men, her black eyes flashing Gavin a look of hate before she descended the gangplank. "Mark my word," said Commandant Samuels grumpily. "That girl will get off with a light sentence. She'll run true to form and sell Tri-World down the river. She'll be the prosecution's principal witness." Gavin shrugged. "Which reminds me," put in Vilanowski, "since the Empire is so anxious for me to return to the fold, I don't want to appear too eager." "Eh?" A pained expression rippled the TIS commandant's ruddy features. "I'd like the chief engineer's rating aboard the first ship to reach the stars." There was a wistful note in Vilanowski's voice. "There shouldn't be any hitch there," the commandant agreed in a relieved tone. "You're the logical man to head an expedition outside the system." "What about a third assistant engineer?" Gavin interrupted. "We work pretty well together," said Vilanowski. Gavin's lean, freckled face broke into a grin. "It's a bargain." The two men solemnly shook hands. End of Part 8.